Well, welcome everyone to the Mad Crip Theology Podcast. It's so good to be back. We had a bit of a hiatus as we were doing some things, getting some work done, and graduating and defending and writing and stuff. So it's so wonderful to be back here with you. We do have a couple of announcements that we wanted to share. So maybe I'll get started with that. So we just want to celebrate together that Miriam is officially a doctor now. Miriam defended her dissertation and everything went really well. So huge congratulations to you, Miriam. Yay!
Thank you.
Yay!
Very cool. Um, do you want to mention the feed spot one, Mira? Or would you like me to?
Uh, the feed part we were named in the top five disability podcast. So thank you to feed part for finding us.
Yeah, that was so cool to see. And we can put the link to the feed spot list of the other really good Canadian disability podcasts into the notes for the show as well today. We have a few other announcements related to the Mad Crip Theology Press today. So we did put out a call for content recently for a new anthology that we're hoping to put together. So for sustainability and longevity, the press is starting to release digital exclusives as a part of our offerings for folks. And so one new digital exclusive that we're working on right now is called Growing Up Female and Evangelical: Madness, Faith, and the Search for Community. And so if that interests you, or if that's a part of your life journey and you want to write something for us, we would love to hear from you. And we just want to, that's a working title. It will probably change. We just want to make sure that everyone knows that we want trans, non-binary, queer, and gender expansive voices in this anthology. So don't let the female throw you off. Um, yeah, so hopefully we'll hear from you if you have anything, any ideas or anything you've been working on. And the due date for those is the end of April of 2025. But if you need a little bit more time, it's all good. Just message us. You can DM us on Instagram or you can shoot us an email as well. Um, and then we have one
And
more announcement.
the journal will be back sometime this fall. We're going to continue publishing once a year, so our call for papers and creative content will go out in the other spring. So if you are working on something this semester, keep us in mind.
Yes, and we've been it's been so nice to go to publishing once per year. It feels like Crip time has kicked in and it's been so good. So we're publishing kind of like bigger issues, but it's been better for everyone's body minds to be able to slow down a little bit with the publishing schedule. So we appreciate everyone's flexibility and understanding about the publishing. So yeah, so that was a lot of announcements, it feels like, but we got through it. So now let's get to the good stuff. So we're so happy today to be joined by Ty and Robbie, who are here to chat with us about their pieces in the fall 2024 issue of the journal. And so what we decided to do is we're going to switch it up a little bit today and go one by one. We usually go back and forth, but we're going to go one by one as we're moving through. So, um, Robbie, would you mind introducing yourself for our dear listeners?
Sure. My name is Robbie Walker, he, they pronouns. Today, usually I have brownish hair, gray eyes, toothy smile. I like my teeth, they're mostly okay. um, and I'm wearing a green v-neck shirt. I like the color. It reminds me of mint. And I'm currently a PhD candidate at Trinity College in the Toronto School of Theology. And I'll give you the cheeky elevator pitch from my dissertation: how to get queer people and Pentecostals to talk without killing each other first. If they do it afterwards, it's technically none of my business.
Love it. We will definitely read that when it's published, Robbie. That sounds lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Robbie, you're for this issue of the journal, you wrote a sermon that we published of yours. So the first question Miriam and I wanted to ask you when we were thinking about questions was so your sermon engages deeply with both disability, justice, and healing narratives. So what drew you to this particular passage in Acts that you used, and how do you see it speaking to contemporary conversations about accessibility in the church?
Thanks for the question. I think the first time I had to consider the particular text, so the text in the sermon was Acts chapter 3, where Peter and John heal a man sitting next to Beautiful Gate in the temple. And the first time I engaged that text was in a class called Prophetic Preaching. And I was really curious about it because I wanted a way of naming the Holy Spirit in the world while sort of grappling with the challenges I was getting from other classmates about, how do you do social justice around disability when you're a Pentecostal, Robbie? And so I think that was the first time that I considered it. And then I was asked by my friend Beth Molina, who's a pastor in Vancouver, to become part of her church's disability justice series. And so I returned to it again and gave it a second look, just to see if I wanted to update what I said the first time. So usually that happens when one is a preacher. It's like, you massage and I would say that differently, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Sorry, my mouse isn't working today. Yeah, along with the intro you gave us, Robbie, in your sermon, you reflected a bit about the tension between being Pentecostal theologian and also engaging with disability justice. And we wondered how you navigated these tensions, especially given Pentecostals' historical, maybe lessening, but historical focus on the healing that happened harmful to people like us.
Yeah, it's a good question.
It's a big one.
No, it's okay. It's sometimes when someone, especially when they use the word navigate, I'm like, I navigate that? Really? you know, because it's huge, and I don't know about you, Mayor, but I'm like, I usually find myself spectacularly uncomfortable in almost any new room that I go into because of those intersections, and so I sort of quote unquote spoil the space anytime I roll in for the first time, because it's like, oh, like, my body self immediately brings people up short. And then you add in the intersections and people go, what the F is going on? So how do I navigate the tensions? Very carefully, because the conviction that I currently have is that I am not interested in colonizing anybody else's experience. So, if one is interested in physical healing, as I am, that is mine. That is not for me to impose on anyone who disagrees with me, or, Jesus is a big girl. She chooses her own friends. That's a conversation between that person and their community and God. And so my job is to respect the people that I encounter where they are, and their theological integrity, and their prayer lives, and their journeys with God. And if there are people that they say, I look at the Gospels and people like me were cured or healed, can you pray for me that way? I'll be like, yeah, sure. Now, what will you do, or how can we serve you if what you are looking for doesn't happen automatically? How can we serve you, and how will you know that you are still loved, and that you still belong, and that you're still accepted, even if the outcome that you want doesn't occur? So I think balancing those tensions is important for me.
Thank you, Robbie. I really appreciate what you're saying today. And I'm teaching a course on disability this semester. And I've heard some of my students raise the point that they feel like if they want healing, especially folks who have chronic pain,
Mm-hmm.
one of the students said, I don't want to feel like this anymore. It's really hard, and the meds they're not working. And
Mm-hmm.
they said that they were really shunned in another disability class that they had taken because they felt this way. And so I
Yeah.
agree, there needs to be space, that we need to be able to hold space for these conversations, for everybody to be a part of the disability community. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I really appreciate that. And I also like that you spoiled the space. Like, that just made me so happy. And I think that's going to be like my new life mantra. Honestly, that's
I'm
amazing.
here for it, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
disrupt the spaces, not in a rude way.
Yeah, yeah.
But if people who want to be there and who should be there are not there, spoil the space. Go ahead.
Yeah. Love that.
So yeah.
Okay, so the next question we wanted to chat with you about, Robbie, is you talk about the way that healing should be about conferring dignity and agency rather than flashy displays of power.
Mm,
So can you expand on what a truly justice-oriented healing ministry could look like?
mm. Uh, I hope that Ty hears some resonances. But one of the points that I'm making for the last several years, since about 2018, especially before pandemic, is that accessibility and universal design are healing ministry. And so this idea that you have to have the flash and bang in order to do justice, um, is half the picture. And if you don't include both, if you don't include, the Holy Spirit can do genuinely weird things, and even if the weird you're looking for doesn't quite happen, there's still stuff that's up to us. And so, universal design, people people with visible and invisible disabilities are on your leadership team in key roles. And and what I mean by that is it's equitable in terms of if they're present, they can change the rules. If you can't change the rules by your presence, it's not equitable, right? Because I have the responsibility, I think, if I'm in a community who genuinely wants to love me as the CP, ADHD, neuroatypical, on the autism spectrum, all the things, queer, and something harms me or makes my life difficult, even if it's not harmful, and I say to leadership, hey, adjust yourself, please, because you love me and because you love us. And if they refuse, that's a problem. But if I have the ability to keep my community accountable, right, for what they do and the decisions they make about why do you have stairs leading up to the pulpit? So if you're doing renovation, are people who are typically able still using those stairs, or is everybody preaching from the floor? Even tiny things like that, right, are a way of incorporating what does this look like in practical terms when there are disabled and atypical bodies of all sorts in a space. Oh, and can I add one other quick thing? Because I noticed that Ty had a citation to my favorite Pentecostal theologian. His name is Amos Yong. And Amos Yong, when he writes about disability, he goes, here's one way you know you're being equitable. There are visibly disabled people on your healing ministry team who are praying for the flashy stuff. And that's still allowed. Someone isn't discounted from the charismatic side of the ministry just because it hasn't happened yet. And that feels dangerous to a lot of the people that I grew up with, because how do you know there's not something wrong with you? This sort of rhetoric, right? So by saying, look, we're all on the way, nobody's arrived yet. Look, here we are. We're all in the mess together. We're learning to follow Jesus together. Let's go. So, yeah, thanks.
That's really interesting, Robbie. And I don't think access to the pulpit is this more than it, but it's a big move if more churches do that. I know.
Yes.
I know that.
I had you in the back of my head when I was preaching, because I was like, I have friends who have been in much more unjust situations than I ever have, related to, we can't hire you because we don't want to spend the money.
Right.
Fuck well off. Excuse me. So that's what I want to say to those big wigs on your behalf, Mayor. I don't know if you do that yourself, but I'm like, fuck well off. All right.
Oh my God. I think things are starting to change, hopefully, in the church. We want to come back again to the intersectional identities. I know I also have CP and I'm also queer, so we like in that way. And I find that more people ask me to speak about disability justice rather than queer justice, and I love it when people are, that imaginative to ask about critical justice, but we wondered how these identities intersect in your own work.
Thanks. Yeah, I find it's interesting for it to be part of my vocation that people will say, can you speak specifically about disability justice? And I always come back and I say, yes. And I'm going to mention that I'm queer, and I'm going to mention that I'm Pentecostal, and I'm going to mention that I'm now part of the mainline churches, and all of these things, because all of them are relevant and nobody is only one thing. Hello. And so when I started learning about intersectionality, that was just really powerful. Like, one really practical way to think about it is nobody is only one thing. So why are you only asking one question? So I've already sort of mentioned the struggle and the back and forth. How can you be Pentecostal and disabled? How can you be Pentecostal and queer? Because if you believe in healing, how do you know your queerness isn't something God wants to heal? I'm like, well, because I'm sitting in a single body with both, and I can tell you, I think in my conviction that God wants to heal the one and not the other. And there's my personal conviction, and you can slice the pie differently if you wish. But there it is. Yeah. Do I ever feel, I'm just reading in the chat, do I ever feel like one gets prioritized over the others? Yeah. Lately it's disability. Sometimes it's queerness. Hardly anybody wants me to speak as a Pentecostal, so I just mix it in anyways, because it's well part of my personality. Yeah, it's like I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's not just other people, it's me sometimes holding the tension and all of the convictions that I'm like, okay, all of these things need to balance or dance together somehow. And I'm not quite sure how to do it. So sometimes I make myself spectacularly uncomfortable trying to wrestle with all of these intersections.
Well, I appreciate that, Robbie. And I also live in just like I live in a big mess of like a blob of uncomfortableness. So I get it. I was
Uh-huh.
thinking it kind of, it spoke to me a little bit when you were talking about how as we grow and sort of move in the world, people when people start asking us to speak, I like when you had some boundaries and you said yes, but I will also need to do this and this, because I like, for me, that's about congruence, right? It's like you're showing up
Yes.
as your whole self, and you bring all the things with you. uh
Yes.
that's so important. So I really respect you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last question that we have for you, Robbie, we've really picked your brain today, is
I enjoy it, can't you tell?
okay,
My
awesome.
inner Pentecostal's coming out to play. You can tell. All right.
Hallelujah. All right. So
Hallelujah.
your sermon ends with a powerful reflection on systemic ableism in the church. So
Mm.
whether through inaccessible spaces, exclusionary policies, or the way that we frame healing. So what are some concrete ways churches can move beyond inclusion to true accessibility and belonging? This is probably a question you hear a lot. We mentioned
Yeah.
the hatred of the stairs. What are there any other
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
are there any
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
things that have been bubbling up lately that you might want to share?
One of the things that, because I hang out in Anglican spaces last year, so the Diocese of Toronto, the Anglican Diocese, has a specific social justice push that they try to be intersectionally informed, but they have one push that they want the entire diocese to do. Last year, it was around Ontario Disability Support, the Ontario program that funds, in quotes, um, you know, permanently disabled from the government's perspective, permanently disabled adults. Fine, fair. I'm a recipient and it makes my life significantly easier and more manageable. And I'm still 25% below the poverty line in Canada because the system isn't just. So one of the things about, we want to talk about universal access or design. It's like one of the things that I want to say to people is like, it's so good when the way you run your services, the way you configure your buildings, the way your leadership teams work in your parish or your congregation are firing on all cylinders. And universal basic income, guaranteed livable income, increasing ODSP by 100%. Okay, like those sorts of larger systemic things also come into play, because if the government won't do it, and you have bodies in need, I'm not just speaking as a disabled person, but like half my congregation now is people from the African diaspora, some of whom are refugees for various awful reasons. And how do they stabilize themselves in Canadian society? And if the government won't do it for them, and they're here, what's our responsibility? And can we do one better than a government bureaucracy? Usually the answer is yes. I'm not complaining about the government being there, because I'm not one of these Christians that say, who cares about government, support? Let the church do it. Let the church do it. Let faith communities do it. And and poke at the systems until they become more humane. And so for me, the broader systemic thing around income has a lot to do with how people experience universal design and access to spaces and etc. Because sometimes you just need the baseline sense of neurological security, right? That you sort of deep breath out, that I will be secure even if life goes sideways this week. So yeah.
Yeah, and guaranteed livable income would be is so important for so many people. So
Yeah.
thank you
Mayor, can I just,
yeah,
do you resonate with this? I have one question for you.
for
Do
me.
you well, because I just have a thought that I want to share with you.
Okay.
Do you ever encounter the attitude that somehow being visibly disabled is less expensive than being able-bodied? I'm
Um
sticking my tongue out.
I I haven't had that, but I don't think most people realize how expensive a life are with transportation and equipment and care services beyond the I know I only get an hour a day of attending care, which is not enough for me to live. So I don't
Mm,
think many people know the financial cost of
okay.
disability.
I just wanted to double check whether that was just in my head, because my consistent experience is that people I talk to literally think it is less expensive
No,
to be visibly disabled. I'm like, no,
no.
no. But because people believe that, that's why we can be, whoever is on ODSP can be 25% under the poverty line.
Yeah, and
So,
that's around it's around capitalism, it's around the worthiness of people's lives so
mhm.
much. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So thank you for naming that conversation, Robbie. And now you get a little break, and we get to turn our attention to Ty's work, who we're so delighted to have here. So, Ty, can you introduce yourself and say anything you would like about yourself?
Thanks, Mayor. So visibly, I have no hair. I have brown eyes. I finally surrendered to the fact my eyes are getting old and I have bifocals. I'm wearing a black hoodie. That's a Star Trek hoodie. So it's got the Star Trek emblem. And then for those who watch Star Trek Picard, it has his #1, his pit bull dog. The bully breeds have been the most gentle with my son. Our first one, his old house hippo that passed, he was able to walk with his stroke affected side of the CP, and she would not pull at all. So just those different intuitions. I'm a writer, a dad of 2, one with complex medical needs. I'm an advocate, I'm an educator. I'm curious. I like to play, I like to push back and really get groups to think differently, hopefully. And I'm also a Trekkie. And I was going to say, so for those in the know, I'll try not to drop any colorful metaphors, but after hearing Robbie talk, I'm guessing we're okay with that.
And I'm also a trekker, so we're good.
Excellent.
I think kinda odd one out here, but you three have all the tricky fun you want.
Yay! Nerds unite.
Yeah.
All right. So Ty, so we're so happy to have your piece as a part of the journal. This is the first time that you've written for us. So thank you so much for becoming a part of the conversation. So your piece was fascinating to read, and there was a lot of I think you interweave your personal experiences with some good books and good theories that you've read. There's some theology mixed in there, so it's the kind of thing that we like to publish at the journal. Um, so your piece frames dignity as deeply connected to authentic belonging in faith communities. So can you share what led you to explore this theme?
I think it's just rooted in the way I came to understand the faith in general. I was not a traditional church kid. Or a traditional one stream of Christianity kid. I was baptized Anglican. My godparents were Presbyterian. I went to an ecumenical vacation Bible school before coming back to faith as an adult in the United Church. And my mom and my nan shaped my understanding of everyone's created the way they reflect God, and everyone deserves to have a place where they can be themselves and belong. And so that's always what I've taken into wherever I've been, whether it's been in shelters, helping with life recovery work, over the intersections of different pieces of people, building youth and children's ministries, or young adults, or in dementia care, or in the classroom. And so the hardest part I found was always the struggle within faith communities themselves. They will either have a very narrow focus on what the created image is and how we're to be, or they may pick an aspect they'll do well. So they may be very affirming to the 2S LGBTQI communities, but then drop the ball on disabilities, or be affirming to a little bit of the disability community and have a strategy for one specific idea, but not have those other equitable pieces. Or think that, as the previous conversation with Mary and Robbie was talking about, that the government covers everything. So it's very cheap to exist with disabilities or disability family, and doesn't understand the complexities of costs, or even the complexities of constantly being forced as families or individuals with visible and invisible disabilities to constantly live in lack. The idea that you're shaped under, to get full funding, your file and your paperwork has to basically prove you're deserving. And in my context in Alberta, deserving is getting scary. So being able to understand how to break this basically misinterpretation of scripture of ableism up so that people can begin to understand what this looks like. And it's more than just assuming there's a ramp somewhere into a building or someplace you can park your assist device.
Yeah, thank you. I hadn't realized you're in the United Church. So yeah, United Church. I should have guessed that when you use Tom Reynolds' work around the myth of normalcy or the cult of normalcy. And in your book, you talk about how many churches prioritize appearance rather than actual inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you shared some in your book, but for listeners, can you talk about some practical ideas that
Mm-hmm.
would help congregations move beyond this performative inclusion?
Yeah. There's some practical things. So I exist kind of in this spectrum of mainlinism. We have a small Presbyterian congregation me and my son usually attend. We also attend online some United churches. I have some background in the Anglican Church. Practical ideas of inclusion. One of the steps actually comes out of life recovery for me. One of our main sacraments is communion. Is our table actually open to everyone to be able to participate? And that does look at, gluten-free and juice. How do we talk about communion with those who tube feed? So they can also be included. Reducing the barrier as much as possible and not having it as, well, here's your gluten option. Why not just have gluten-free period for everybody? Why do I have to be able to be cognitive in my moment of trying to connect with the holy to pause and go, oh, is that the one that's going to make me sick? As Robbie brought up, the ramp into the pulpits or where we station things, those actual pieces are definitely necessary and ongoing. Couple times we've had churches offer to build a ramp and then drop the ball and decide, no, it's just too costly. How do we move in? How visible are different folks doing different things within the church itself? So are they part of the life of the church? Not just Sunday mornings, but with the other activities going on? Do we ensure that it's possible for everyone to participate? When we do potlucks, do we ask that the ingredients be listed? Do we alternate loudness levels in our services? So it doesn't always have to be low sensory, but do we alternate loudness levels so that we allow for those times of authentic quiet, but also you can get loud because some need those as well. Those aspects. Also, too, as someone who has some known neurological challenges, I almost burst out laughing one day when I was having a bad neuro day and really couldn't stand because I was trying to offset a seizure. And someone's going, well, stand in body or spirit. And I sat there going, no, my spirit is saying sit down. And it's okay with God. So even the language we put forward, just pausing and asking, how would this be heard from different people? One of the questions I put forward in a discussion once was, we always talk about the new body in heaven, but what if that doesn't happen? What about if we just accept that there is diversity and shape for that and build for that? And part of that is looking at our bathrooms, looking at our spaces in churches. Depending on the age, I have issues sometimes just with myself as a bigger guy being in a quote unquote disability stall because it's only about 3 inches wider than the other stalls. What if we built actual gender neutral bathrooms that had the bars, had a change bench for any age so that anybody could flow through? You may have only 2 or 3 bathrooms there in the building, but at least they would be able to be used for everybody. Is there a place for you where you can go to quiet if you're feeling overwhelmed? And is it unlocked? That was one of the challenges in some of the congregations we've been a part of, is the space wasn't unlocked. And in that moment, you want to center, chasing down the person with the key can be a bit more than you need. So it's just some of the ideas. And that's on top of continuing some of the practices from the pandemic. Do we live stream? Do we close caption? When you're live streaming, please keep the PowerPoint slides on the screen. There's nothing more frustrating than when you're trying to engage with the live stream and then all of a sudden the slide disappears on the song and you have this great, beautiful picture of the choir, the audience, and you're going, that's great, but now I've just missed out on all the words or the interactive prayer or responsitory reading. And now I'm out of that moment and it just feels like I'm in a TV show and I'm not in worship. Those are just some of the ideas, because that connects, that shows you're seeing the person. And engage, talk, find out. I don't know if that answered or not.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I appreciate those really concrete, practical things that churches can think about. That's awesome. I was thinking as you were describing the bathroom at Emmanuel College, where Miriam and I teach and our students and stuff. I think that they converted one of the offices into the accessibility bathroom. It's so big. It's literally the size of an office. It's like a whole room. So when you go in, you're like, oh, this is so spacious. So there's some ideas there of how you can make a good bathroom for folks. All right, so we're gonna move now to another question about healing. So you bring up the concept of healing as social justice rather than cure. And can you expand on what that distinction means to you and how it should shape how churches engage with disability?
Yeah. So part of this was reflecting on the gospel readings, reading other folks, obviously, just reflecting on the way my own brain works and going, some folks would say you need to be cured. That's the healing. I'm like, no, I like the way my mind works. That takes away who I am. With my son, it takes away who he is. But there are things that can happen in the healing ministries, as Robbie started to talk about. Are we actually trying to create physical spaces that are accessible? And it goes beyond the building code, because so many times building codes get updated and the pre-existing buildings get grandfathered. I always remember years ago the shock when one priest was at the pulpit before offering, and the church had an individual who had started having to use a mobile assist device. And so he's up there and he's talking, he goes, as you're giving offering, I just want you to consider so-and-so and the fact that we're putting an elevator in and the elevator folks want to be paid. So can we help out a bit with that? And I can tell from Amy's face, she has either known people in finance or and you could just picture who the finance people on the committee were with that announcement from just that action phase, that not living in lack. Yeah, it may be a struggle, but guess what? For that authentic belonging, that healing has to allow for connection. And if your hall is in the basement and folks can't get to the basement, you're not a church. I'm sorry, you're not. You are a social club for the people that can exist in your space. And so healing for social justice is dismantling those systems that create the barriers. So it is part of understanding how the government systems work for individuals with disabilities. So as an entity, you can encourage advocacy to change those systems. You can encourage thoughtful voting. You can encourage folks when they write to their MLAs, their city councilors, their MPs, to point out this is because of their faith. So we start changing the narrative on what Christianity means for disabilities, for queer folk, for the marginalized. And they start to see it's an expansive voice of change. And you also start to, healing is also that systemic change within the church going, oh, isn't it sad so-and-so will never be able to, or that your child can never do this, or shut the hell up. I celebrate my kid and the kids that were in a Sunday school that were across different disabilities for who they were and what they could do. And if you can help shift that mindset as a church for families, you alleviate a grieving process that's constant. And that's a healing moment. Because then if that you can alleviate that healing process, and they know there's a place they can go and be courageous and stand there and go, this is who we are and we have value. That changes your ability to interact with the systems that want to strip you down and break you down and leave you thinking there is no other outcome but institutionalization. And that is a healing ministry. Cure is you have a chronic condition and it's cured, whether through the blessing of medicine and surgeries that God has given us, or through those miracles that do happen. But when you read the gospel stories, what always struck me was it wasn't just the healing, that miracle moment in the resource of that time. It was Jesus looking at those folks and going, now go back to those folks that say you don't belong and tell those SOBs, guess what? God says I have worth and value and I belong. So damn it, let me in. And always there's that fun story of the friends ripping down the roof of the house to get access, which I think I remember one school board meeting I was at where they were talking about trying to remove an implement to accessibility. I said, they couldn't get people in doing it. I said, well, me and my friends got some jackhammers. It happened fairly quickly when the novices who just wanted to play with destructive equipment wanted to do something.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite toys. Yeah. Community solidarity. We can do it.
Yeah,
Get people moving.
it does.
We are so grateful for both of you and for your work and your the conversation today, and we wanted to give you some time to talk to each other about anything you've heard today or you've read in each other's book. So I'd invite Robbie to get that conversation going.
Thanks. I think I'm resisting the urge to ask a Star Trek question about disability, because I'm hoping, Ty, that you've also bumped into resources where there are actually scholars who sort of think through how does Star Trek portray disability and neurodivergence and etc. And it's really fascinating stuff. I was curious because it came up in your essay and also in the way the question was phrased about social justice rather than cure. Can you talk to me some more about that binary? Because for myself, I don't understand rather than. I would want to say and. I wouldn't want to leverage one over the other.
I create the binary because too often folks focus on the cure that leads back to what we view as normal or typical. We don't have an expansive concept of normal. So we want everyone to align with what our own paradigmic vision of humanity is.
Right.
And so by leveraging and separating them, we're forcing the conversation on what does it look like to create that world now Jesus called us to in the Gospel of Mark. And then what else can be done? Because some things may not have a cure or do not need one.
Yeah.
And so I really want to be able to separate those two because there's that confluence of both and one, and we then ignore what we have ability to actually change.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate how you framed that, because I realized even for myself, I don't think by definition that people in my position who want cure are necessarily internally ableist, but I definitely think I've definitely received legitimate challenge, legitimate in the sense of people were challenging me to be less harmful. In terms of, you do have a particular idea of what that would look like, and are you imposing it, right? As opposed to maybe the only, this is me, maybe the only range I should care about is I want to exclude the edges that are genuinely harmful the vast majority of the time. And anything between those edge cases could be normal, even if I don't see it, right? So I appreciate that you leverage the binary in that way, just to challenge people to say, oh, what is my view of normal in my head? And is that a problem? Yeah. What do you got for me?
I was actually curious, in the realms you exist in, how you actually leverage that concept of the fuller identity statements, especially with our pushback against, more generalized, obviously, pushback against even pronouns, never mind a fuller understanding of who we are, that personal identity in the existence.
Can you give me a little bit more? I'm not quite sure.
So when you talked about Pentecostal and queer and disability and that boundary you set, but how you do in such a way that maybe it helps others understand.
Oh, gotcha. My own preference or my own gift, I think, sometimes is the people that I grew up with. It's like, where is that in Bible? Or how should I think about Bible in order to help me answer that question? And I am increasingly wary of bigwigs with institutional power demanding that I fess up about Bible. Okay. But on the other hand, if my brother, my sister, my sibling, my friend, my lover is struggling like I was when I was coming out and, figuring out how that was, and I had a friend of mine who is a professional engineer, God bless him, because he took so much emotional labor, because I vomited all over him verbally for an hour. I looked at the clock and I had hardly taken a breath. And then he leans forward and he puts his hand on my arm. Robbie, what are you scared of? And I just lost it. Snot cry. Everything gets cleaned out. But those moments of the personal relationship that someone was willing to sit there and ask the really key empathetic questions. So when someone who isn't wearing a power trip on their sleeve wants to sit down with me, then let's talk Bible. Let's talk about gender pronouns. Let's talk about Jacob wrestling with the angel. Let's talk about Samuel when he goes to anoint David. And, so the oldest guy who's big and strapping and attractive, oh, this is the Lord's anointed. No. The people look on the outward appearance and the Lord looks on the heart. Oh, the totality of the person. And God knows, and that person knows. So maybe if that's a scriptural thing that repeats across the canon, then it is none of my business except to love well if I have a sibling who says, gender dysphoria, social stuff isn't fitting, what I'm assigned. Can you please call me X? Can you please refer to me as Y? And talk about it that way. But yeah, I'm not interested in talking to people who demand that I supply them a framework before they're willing to change their mind. Because can you please name me any example in Scripture where God gave the framework first before God actually did the thing, and then the people caught up? Right? This is the book of Acts. This is everywhere in the canon. maybe the exception of build the ark, Noah. There's a flood coming. That might be the only exception I can think of in the entire canon, right? And so the demand that, disabled people, queer people, vulnerable people generally need to supply the theology before you do the right thing is backwards, scripturally speaking. So thanks. Long-winded, but there is.
Thank you.
Well, we're so grateful, like Miriam said, we're so grateful that you could join us today. Thank you so much. This has been such a good conversation. Miriam and I were furiously typing in the background saying we'd love to hear you talk about these different ways of thinking about healing, and we're so glad that you're part of this conversation that in the journal and also here on the podcast. So yay. And Star Trek fans, now I know that you're a Star Trek fan, so I can bother you about that. I'm
please.
fascinated with the Borg.
Definitely.
The Borg is just my thing. Okay. So all right.
Resistance is not futile.
Nope.
That's right.
And the character of Pike is an intriguing study in disability in life.
Yes. So much time. We should do an entire podcast episode on Star Trek and disability. That would be very fun. We'll table that for later. All right. So thank you so much for being here. And yeah, it was so great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.